The wind howled through the gap where my living room window used to be, a jagged invitation for winter to come barging in. I shivered, pulling my thin sweater tighter. Calling a repair company felt like admitting defeat, plus I really couldn't afford it right now. That's when my gaze drifted next door to Mr. Peterson's house. Mr. Peterson was, well, a fixture in the neighborhood. 67 years young, he kept his lawn immaculate and always had a friendly wave for everyone. We weren't exactly friends, more like friendly acquaintances. I'd borrow a cup of sugar once, he'd helped me jumpstart my car last winter. Normal neighbor stuff. He was a retired carpenter, I remembered, a fact Mrs. Henderson from across the street had mentioned when I first moved in. Maybe, just maybe, he could offer some advice. Or, dare I hope, some actual help. Swallowing my pride, and the cold air, I trudged next door and knocked on his screen door. He answered almost immediately, a warm smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. Well, hello there, Clara. What brings you out on such a blustery day? I explained my predicament, gesturing vaguely in the direction of my ravaged window. I know it's a lot to ask, Mr. Peterson, but I was wondering if you might have any tips. Or know someone who could fix it cheaply? He listened patiently, his blue eyes twinkling with a hint of amusement. When I finished, he chuckled softly. Tips, I have. But why don't I just take a look? I might even be able to lend a hand. Got nothing better to do on a Tuesday afternoon. He grabbed his jacket and followed me back to my house, leaving me feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the lack of insulation. As Mr. Peterson assessed the damage, I took the opportunity to really look at him. Up close, his face was a roadmap of wrinkles, each line telling a story I suddenly wanted to hear. His hair, what was left of it, was silver, neatly combed back. He wore a worn flannel shirt over a plain white t-shirt, and his jeans were faded but clean. There was a quiet strength about him, a sense of competence that was incredibly appealing. He ran a calloused hand along the broken frame. Nasty break, he commented, more to himself than to me. Looks like a stray baseball. You get a lot of kids playing around here? I nodded. Yeah, the park is just a block away. It was bound to happen eventually, I guess. He straightened up, turning to face me. I think I have some spare wood in the garage that'll do the trick. Might not be a perfect match, but it'll keep the wind out. His blue eyes held mine for a moment, and I felt a strange flutter in my stomach. It wasn't just gratitude I was feeling. That would be amazing, Mr. Peterson. Thank you so much. Call me George, Clara. Mr. Peterson makes me sound ancient. He winked, and that flutter intensified. George. The name suited him. He disappeared into his garage, and I watched him go, a new awareness dawning within me. He wasn't just a helpful neighbor, he was a man. A handsome man, even. And for the first time I noticed. This simple act of kindness was quickly becoming something more complicated, something interesting. George returned with a piece of lumber, a toolbox overflowing with tools, and a confident smile. All right, let's get to work, he announced, laying everything out on a drop cloth he'd also brought. The initial awkwardness was almost palpable. I hovered nearby, unsure of how to help without getting in the way. He, on the other hand, seemed completely at ease, his movements practiced and efficient. He measured, he sawed, he hammered, each action precise and deliberate. Maybe I could hold that for you? I offered, pointing to a piece of wood he was trying to secure. Sure thing, he said, handing it over. Our fingers brushed, and a jolt of electricity shot up my arm. It was such a fleeting moment, but it lingered in the air between us. I tried to focus on holding the wood steady, but my heart was pounding in my chest. He worked close to me, his arm occasionally brushing against mine as he reached for a tool. Each accidental touch sent shivers down my spine. I could smell his aftershave, a subtle, woodsy scent that was both comforting and strangely alluring. You're doing a great job, he said, his voice low and close to my ear. Just hold it steady like that. I swallowed hard, trying to ignore the heat that was rising in my cheeks. This was just neighborly help, I reminded myself. But the way he was looking at me, the way his presence filled the small space, made it impossible to deny the growing tension between us. This was more than just fixing a window. It was something else entirely. The hammering stopped, and George wiped his brow with the back of his hand, leaving a smudge of sawdust on his forehead. "Phew," he said, with a chuckle. "This old body isn't what it used to be." I laughed, a genuine laugh that eased some of the tension. "Tell me about it." "I pulled a muscle just trying to move the couch yesterday." "Ah, the joys of getting older," he said, a wistful smile on his face. "Though, I wouldn't trade it for anything. Seen a lot, learned a lot." "Like what?" I asked, genuinely curious. He leaned against the wall, considering. "Well," he began, "I learned that life is too short to drink cheap whiskey. And that forgiveness is always better than holding a grudge. But mostly," he paused, looking directly at me, "I learned that you should never be afraid to take a chance, even if it scares you half to death." His words resonated with me, hitting a nerve I hadn't realized was exposed. I'd been playing it safe for so long, afraid of taking risks, afraid of getting hurt. But here was George, a man who had clearly lived a full life, encouraging me to embrace the unknown. "That's good advice," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I needed to hear that. "We all do, sometimes," he replied, his gaze softening. "Especially when we least expect it." He picked up his hammer again, but the air between us had shifted. The conversation had created a deeper connection, a shared understanding that transcended the simple act of fixing a window. It was a connection that felt both exciting and terrifying. And I was suddenly very aware of how much I wanted to explore it. I found myself watching him as he worked, the way his brow furrowed in concentration, the set of his jaw. I noticed the small details, the flecks of gray in his blue eyes, the way his calloused hands moved with such precision, the faint scent of wood and aftershave that clung to him. He was a man of experience, a man who had lived and learned, and I was suddenly incredibly drawn to that. "You know," I said, breaking the comfortable silence, "I've always wanted to learn woodworking." He looked up, surprised. "Really? It's a rewarding hobby. My father taught me when I was just a boy." "My grandfather was a carpenter too," I confessed, a memory surfacing from my childhood. "He used to make me little wooden toys. I still have a rocking horse he made for me." George's eyes lit up. "No kidding? What kind of things did he make?" I described the rocking horse, the intricate details he'd carved into the wood, the way it squeaked when you rocked it. As I spoke, I realized how much I missed those days, how much I missed my grandfather. "That's wonderful," George said, his voice filled with genuine warmth. "It's amazing how objects can hold so much memory." We spent the next few minutes reminiscing about our grandfathers, sharing stories and anecdotes. It was a surprising connection, a shared history that we hadn't known existed. It felt like we were building something more than just a window frame, we were building a bridge between our lives, a bridge made of shared memories and mutual understanding. And with each story, each laugh, the attraction between us grew stronger, more undeniable. I could no longer ignore the way my heart skipped a beat every time he looked at me. This was definitely more than just neighborly help. As the afternoon wore on, George shared a story about his late wife, Sarah. He spoke of her with such tenderness, his voice filled with a quiet love that had clearly endured the test of time. He told me about their travels, their shared passions, and the challenges they had faced together. There was a vulnerability in his eyes as he spoke, a glimpse into the depths of his soul that touched me deeply. "She was a remarkable woman," he said, a faint smile gracing his lips. "I miss her every day." I reached out and gently squeezed his arm. "I'm so sorry, George. She sounds wonderful." He looked at me, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Clara. It means a lot." In that moment, I saw past the wrinkles and the silver hair, past the age difference and the societal expectations. I saw a man who had loved deeply, a man who had known loss and grief, but who still possessed a remarkable capacity for kindness and compassion. And I realized that what I was feeling wasn't just attraction, it was respect, admiration, and a deep sense of connection. He wasn't just a handsome neighbor, he was a man of substance, a man of character, a man who had something profound to offer. The vulnerability he had shown me had broken down the last of my defenses, leaving me open to the possibility of something truly special. The window was almost fixed, but I knew that whatever happened between us, this day had already changed everything. The new frame was in place, the glass was secured, and George was applying the final touches of caulk around the edges. The window, once a gaping hole, was now whole again. "There," he said, stepping back to admire his work. "Good as new." I looked at the window, then back at George. "It's perfect." "Thank you, George. I really don't know what I would have done without you." He smiled, a genuine, heart-stopping smile. "Anytime, Clara." I enjoyed it. He gathered his tools, carefully placing them back in his toolbox. As he was packing up, he paused, his hand resting on the handle of the toolbox. "You know," he said, his voice hesitant, "Sarah always loved having flowers in the house." "Brightened up the place," she said. He looked around my living room, his gaze lingering on the empty windowsill. "Maybe you should get some." It was such a simple suggestion, but it felt like so much more. It felt like he was inviting me into his world, sharing a piece of his past with me. It felt like he was saying that even though Sarah was gone, life went on, and that there was still room for beauty and joy. "That's a lovely idea," I said, my voice soft. "I think I will." He nodded, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "Good. You deserve it." He picked up his toolbox and turned to leave. But as he reached the door, he hesitated again, turning back to face me. "Clara," he said, his voice low and serious, "I've really enjoyed spending time with you today." He paused, his eyes searching mine. Maybe we could do it again sometime?" "Under different circumstances, of course." My heart leaped. "I'd like that very much, George." He smiled, a smile that reached all the way to his eyes. "Good. I'll call you." And with that, he was gone, leaving me standing in my newly repaired living room, the air thick with unspoken possibilities. The window was fixed, but something else had been broken open, something inside of me. And I couldn't wait to see where it would lead. The phone rang later that evening. I knew it was George before I even answered. "Hi, Clara," he said, his voice warm and familiar. "It's George." "Hi, George," I replied, trying to keep the excitement from my voice. "I was thinking," he continued, "maybe we could grab some coffee tomorrow? There's a little cafe downtown I think you'd like." "I'd love that," I said, without hesitation. We arranged to meet at 10 the next morning. As I hung up the phone, I couldn't stop smiling. The butterflies in my stomach were doing acrobatics. I spent the rest of the evening thinking about George, replaying our conversation in my head, and wondering what tomorrow would bring. The next morning, I found myself carefully selecting an outfit, something that was both comfortable and flattering. I settled on a simple blue dress and a pair of sandals. As I looked in the mirror, I couldn't help but notice the sparkle in my eyes, a sparkle that hadn't been there in a long time. When I arrived at the cafe, George was already there, sitting at a table by the window. He stood up as I approached, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he smiled. He was wearing a different flannel shirt, this one a deep green, and his silver hair was neatly combed. He looked handsome, even more so than I remembered. "You look lovely, Clara," he said, pulling out a chair for me. "Thank you, George," I replied, blushing slightly. "You look nice too." We ordered our coffee and settled into conversation. It was easy, comfortable, and natural. We talked about everything and nothing, from our favorite books to our childhood dreams. I found myself hanging on his every word, fascinated by his stories and insights. He had a way of seeing the world that was both wise and optimistic, and I found myself increasingly drawn to his wisdom and life experience. He was like a living library, filled with knowledge and stories that I couldn't wait to explore. And as the morning wore on, I knew that this was just the beginning of something special. As we finished our coffee, George reached across the table and gently took my hand. His touch was warm and reassuring, sending a shiver of electricity through my body. "Clara," he said, his voice soft and sincere, "I have to be honest with you. I haven't felt this way about someone in a very long time." My heart skipped a beat. "George," I replied, my voice barely a whisper, "I feel it too." We sat there for a moment, our hands intertwined, our eyes locked in a silent conversation. The cafe faded into the background as we became lost in each other's gaze. It was as if time stood still, the world outside ceasing to exist. Finally, George broke the silence. "Would you like to go for a walk? There's a park nearby with a beautiful rose garden." "I'd love that," I said, my smile radiant. We strolled through the park, hand in hand, the rose garden a riot of color and fragrance. The air was filled with the sweet scent of blossoms, and the sun warmed our faces. It felt like we were the only two people in the world, completely oblivious to everything around us. As we reached a secluded bench, George stopped and turned to face me. He looked deep into my eyes, his gaze filled with tenderness and desire. "Clara," he said, his voice husky, "I know this might seem crazy, but I feel like I've known you forever." "I feel the same way, George," I replied, my heart pounding in my chest. He reached out and gently brushed a strand of hair from my face, his fingers lingering on my cheek. "You're a beautiful woman, Clara," he said, his voice barely audible. "And I'm so glad I met you." And then, without another word, he leaned in and kissed me. It was a slow, tender kiss, filled with warmth and passion. It was a kiss that sealed our connection, a kiss that promised a future filled with love and happiness. It was a kiss that I would never forget. After the kiss, everything felt different. The air crackled with an unspoken energy, a palpable desire that hung between us. We walked back to my house in a comfortable silence, our hands still intertwined. When we reached my doorstep, George turned to me, his eyes filled with a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. "Clara," he said, his voice hesitant, "would you like me to come in?" My heart pounded in my chest. I knew what he was asking, and I knew what my answer was. "Yes, George," I replied, my voice barely a whisper. "I would." He followed me inside, and I closed the door behind him. The living room, once just a space with a newly repaired window, now felt like a sanctuary, a haven where anything was possible. I turned to face him, my eyes searching his. "George," I said, "I want you to know that I'm not usually like this. I haven't felt this way about someone in a long time, and I want to be sure that this is what we both want." He reached out and gently cupped my face in his hands. "Clara," he said, his voice filled with sincerity, "I know this might seem fast, but I feel a connection with you that I haven't felt with anyone else. I want to explore this, and I want to see where it leads. But only if you're comfortable." I nodded, my eyes filling with tears. "I am, George," I said, my voice trembling. "I really am." And with that, he leaned in and kissed me again, a kiss that was even more passionate than the first. It was a kiss that spoke of longing, of desire, and of a deep and abiding connection. It was a kiss that promised a night filled with love and intimacy. And as we deepened the kiss, I knew that I was ready to take that leap, to embrace the unknown, and to explore the possibilities that lay before us. The age difference, the societal expectations, none of it mattered anymore. All that mattered was the connection we shared, the love that was blossoming between us, and the promise of a night that would change our lives forever. We moved from the living room to the bedroom, drawn together by an invisible force. As George gently unbuttoned my dress, I couldn't help but feel a flicker of nervousness. The age difference was undeniable, and I wondered if I was making a mistake. But then I looked into his eyes, and all my doubts vanished. They were filled with such tenderness, such desire, such respect. He saw me, truly saw me, and that was all that mattered. He slowly lowered me onto the bed, his touch gentle and reverent. He kissed my neck, my shoulders, my breasts, each kiss sending shivers of pleasure through my body. I ran my hands through his silver hair, marveling at the softness of it. I traced the lines on his face, each one telling a story of a life well lived. As we undressed each other, I couldn't help but admire his body. He was older, yes, but he was also strong and virile. His muscles were toned, his skin smooth and warm. He was a man who had taken care of himself, and it showed. He entered me slowly, carefully, his eyes locked on mine. The pleasure was intense, overwhelming. I moaned, arching my back, surrendering myself to the moment. He moved with a grace and confidence that belied his age, his every touch sending me closer to the edge. As we reached our climax, I clung to him tightly, my body trembling with release. We collapsed into each other's arms, breathless and exhausted. Afterward, we lay in silence for a few minutes, our bodies intertwined. I felt a sense of peace and contentment that I hadn't felt in years. The age difference, the societal expectations, none of it mattered anymore. All that mattered was the love we shared, the connection we had forged, and the intimacy we had just experienced. We had taken a chance, and it had paid off. This was just the beginning of something incredible. The next morning, I woke up with George's arm wrapped around me. The sunlight streamed through the newly repaired window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I smiled, remembering the events of the previous night. It had been magical, transformative, and utterly unexpected. George stirred beside me, his eyes fluttering open. He looked at me, his gaze filled with warmth and affection. "Good morning, Clara," he said, his voice husky with sleep. "Good morning, George," I replied, snuggling closer to him. We lay in bed for a while, talking and laughing, reminiscing about the night before. It felt like we had known each other for a lifetime, not just a few days. "So," I said, breaking the comfortable silence, "what happens now?" George propped himself up on one elbow, his eyes searching mine. "That's up to you, Clara," he said, his voice serious. "I'm not going anywhere. I've fallen for you, and I want to see where this goes. But I understand if this is too much for you, if the age difference is a deal-breaker. I won't be offended if you want to walk away." My heart swelled with emotion. "George," I said, "I'm not going anywhere either. I've fallen for you too. And the age difference doesn't matter to me. What matters is the connection we share, the love we feel for each other." He smiled, a smile that reached all the way to his eyes. "Then let's do this," he said, his voice filled with determination. "Let's take it one day at a time and see where it leads us." I nodded, my eyes filling with tears of happiness. "I'd like that very much," I said. He leaned in and kissed me, a kiss that was both tender and passionate. It was a kiss that sealed our commitment, a kiss that promised a future filled with love and happiness. It was a kiss that said, "We're in this together, no matter what." And as we deepened the kiss, I knew that we were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, as long as we had each other. Our story was just beginning, and I couldn't wait to see what the future held. All thanks to a broken window, and a very special neighbor. Life with George settled into a comfortable rhythm. We spent our days exploring the town, going for walks in the park, and cooking meals together. We learned about each other's families, our pasts, and our dreams for the future. The age difference, which had initially seemed so daunting, faded into insignificance as our love deepened. One afternoon, as we were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset, George turned to me, his eyes filled with a mischievous glint. "You know," he said, "I've always wanted to learn how to dance." I laughed. "Really? What kind of dancing?" "Oh, I don't know," he said, shrugging. "Maybe something slow and romantic? Like they do in the movies." I smiled. "Well, I happen to be an excellent dancer," I teased. "I could give you lessons." "Is that an offer?" he asked, his eyes twinkling. "It is," I replied, taking his hand. We stood up and moved into the living room, where I put on some music. George was surprisingly graceful, despite his age. We swayed together, his arms wrapped around my waist, my head resting on his chest. As we danced, I felt a surge of emotion wash over me. I was so grateful for this man, for this love, for this unexpected chapter in my life. I lifted my head and looked into his eyes, my heart overflowing with happiness. "I love you, George," I said, my voice choked with emotion. "I love you too, Clara," he replied, his voice filled with tenderness. And then, without another word, he leaned in and kissed me, a kiss that was even more passionate than all the others. It was a kiss that spoke of a love that had blossomed against all odds, a love that was destined to last a lifetime. It was a kiss that sealed our fate, forever binding us together. As we deepened the kiss, I knew that I had found my soulmate, my partner, my everything. And it all started with a broken window, and a very special act of kindness from a very special neighbor. Our love story was a testament to the fact that age is just a number, and that true love can. Years passed. George and I built a life together, filled with love, laughter, and shared experiences. We traveled the world, explored new hobbies, and supported each other through thick and thin. The age difference never mattered, because our hearts were always aligned. One day, as we were celebrating our 10th anniversary, sitting on the same porch where our love story had truly begun, George turned to me, his eyes filled with a familiar spark. "You know," he said, "I never thanked you for breaking that window." I laughed, remembering the fateful day that had brought us together. "And I never thanked you for fixing it," I replied. He reached out and took my hand, his touch as warm and reassuring as ever. "It was the best broken window of my life," he said, his voice filled with tenderness. "Mine too," I replied, squeezing his hand. We sat in silence for a moment, watching the sunset paint the sky with vibrant colors. The air was filled with a sense of peace and contentment, a feeling of knowing that we were exactly where we were supposed to be. As the sun dipped below the horizon, George turned to me, his eyes filled with love and desire. He leaned in and kissed me, a kiss that was as passionate and electrifying as our very first one. It was a kiss that spoke of a love that had endured the test of time, a love that was stronger than ever. "I love you, Clara," he whispered, his breath warm against my ear. "I love you too, George," I replied, my heart overflowing with happiness. And as we deepened the kiss, I knew that our love story would continue to unfold, and the memory of that broken window, of George's kindness, of our unexpected connection, would forever be etched in my heart. It was a reminder that love can blossom in the most unexpected places, at the most unexpected times, and with the most unexpected people. As I looked at George, his face etched with the wisdom and experience of a life well lived, I knew that I had made the right choice. He was my soulmate, my partner, my everything. And I wouldn't trade our love for anything in the world. He squeezed my hand, as if sensing my thoughts. "Happy anniversary, my love," he whispered, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Happy anniversary to you too," I replied, leaning in to kiss him again. This time, the kiss was slow and lingering, filled with the warmth and comfort of a love that had stood the test of time. It was a kiss that spoke of shared memories, of unwavering support, and of a future filled with endless possibilities. As we deepened the kiss, I closed my eyes and savored the moment, grateful for the broken window, for the kind neighbor, and for the love that had transformed my life in ways I could never have imagined. The end.